sure most of you know about the USA Olympic gymnastics scandal with Larry Nassar. Now we know about the Chicago Blackhawks scandal with a player and a coach during the 2010 Cup run. Most recently, we've heard about the Hockey Canada scandal, where they're using association fees for these settlements. We're seeing these misconduct allegations and sexual assault allegations at every level, professional, amateur, and even club level. How is this happening? What is there to protect the athletes? What is there to investigate, report, and ensure safety with these athletes? Whether it be Swim Canada, Baseball Canada, or even Hockey Canada, our kids are playing these sports. We need to ensure that their safety's there. What is there to protect them?
This episode of Off the Cuff is brought to you by Weaver Simmons, and we're very pleased to bring it to you. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to Off the Cuff. I'm Dhiren.
I'm Matt Butler. We'd like to congratulate Kip McKenzie again on winning our first giveaway. Congratulations. Hope you enjoy those golf shirts, whether you enjoy it on the golf course or otherwise. So make sure to check out our previous content. We have the audio-only podcast that dropped last week, and then we have the YouTube show that comes out every second week. Please make sure to check that out. Subscribe, like, comment, all of the above. I'm excited tonight.
Why?
Because we get to talk about our favorite subject, sports.
Whoa. Our two favorite subjects, sports and law.
Yep.
So today, for the first time ever on an off-the-cuff exclusive, we're bringing you guys a lawyer named Will Russell from the firm of Sport Law.
How cool is that name? Just Sport Law, to the point.
I am jealous of his job.
Yeah.
He gets to talk about law and sports and get paid for it.
Living the dream.
We're doing it wrong, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
We're going to talk to Will after this. We may have to have a different podcast after this. So just a quick sort of breakdown of what we're going to do. We're going to talk about sports law, but a little more in depth within sport. When we think of sports law, I'm sure people we think of agency and negotiating these $100 and $200 million contracts for professional sport. But anybody who signs their kid up for whether it be baseball, hockey, or soccer, they're subject to some sort of organization, and that organization has a code of conduct. And then even when we look at amateur sport and Olympic sport or international competitions, there are federations. Most nations have these federations when it comes to Swim Canada, Soccer Canada, Hockey Canada. We're going to talk about a bit of Hockey Canada today. Everyone, sports law goes further than just these professional sport, NHL, NBA, Major Soccer, Major League Baseball. So, we're going to discuss that a bit more today. And then we think of also international sports. There's the World Anti-Doping Agency. There's the International Olympic Committee, and there's even an International Tribunal of Sport. And so sports law, it's not just these agents cutting these major deals. It goes so far as to even having a code of conduct for not only the players, but the people who are running these federations, these organizations.
And on that code of conduct, all these organizations, and you said something earlier there, they have a code of conduct. Well, a lot of these organizations may not have a code of conduct. And that's been the problem.
It's been an issue.
Right? And so where sport law is going, and through this episode, we're going to take you through the evolution of sport law and give you guys the breakdown as to where it started, where it's going, and where it should be. Mm-hmm. And you'll hopefully get an appreciation of why a code of conduct is important, because, I have kids, and if I enroll my kids in sport, I want my kids to be respected, and athletes have rights. And it's been just recently that athletes have been outspoken about their rights. And that's what sport law is. I think sport law, the field of sport law is been developing in a way to protect athletes from this maltreatment. And so what Matt had just talked about is this universal code of conduct to prevent the maltreatment of athletes in sports. And that UCCMS is the acronym. And what I found researching and learning about this stuff this episode is there's lots of acronyms. So sifting through the acronyms, trying to figure out what they're doing, why they're doing it, was really eye-opening to me to find out actually how badly not professional athletes, like we're not talking NFL, NBA, those people, but we're talking about just the one level under that, and your Olympic athletes and your athletes who are semi-pro, how much they go through, and not just the rigors of their training.
And we know of the major scandals. We know of people have heard of the Chicago Blackhawks scandal. We're going to talk about that with Will. This past summer we've heard of the Hockey Canada scandal. We've known of the U.S. Olympic gymnastics scandal with the conviction of someone who had sexually assaulted Olympians for a number of years, and then we also have there's just a number of scandals that have come through sport that is rather unfortunate. So these code of conducts and these policies, even at the professional level, are so important because in the professional aspect, these athletes are subject to a collective bargaining agreement and contracts. They're employees. So it becomes an employee-employer type relationship. And, we have laws in Ontario that govern that, in Canada that govern that, and the collective bargaining agreements in professional sports govern that. And then you need something similar to protect your athletes, where in the Olympic setting and in the amateur setting as well. So hopefully Will can shine a light on that.
I'm hoping he can answer some of those questions, because I think another intricate and tricky piece to sport is that it's not just bound to one country. There's lots it's universal and there's international implications.
Exactly.
And you could have Team Canada competing in Belarus.
Yeah.
And the laws are different in Belarus and the laws are different in Canada. And so we're hoping to explore some of that and give you guys some insight into the world and life of an athlete from the lens of the law. And that's what we hope that our sit down with Will gives you. So why don't we take a break and head over to Will? We're joined here by Will Russell, a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, and somebody who works in probably the coolest area of law that I can think of. He works for a firm named Sport Law, and in the area of sport law, obviously. And so welcome. Thanks for joining us on our show, Will.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Dhiren.
And so just for our listeners, and perhaps for probably the 5 people that are going to watch this, can you just explain to us what it is you do, and what does a sport lawyer do, and how long you've been doing it?
So sport law is sort of an area of law. Sport organizations are in some ways companies. Groups like any other. They have the need for governance assistance with their bylaws. They have needs for addressing employment disputes, employment agreement leases with their and disputes with their landlords. So really, they're organizations like any other, and we provide basically a form of in-house counsel or outside in-house counsel to sport organizations. And then there's the much more specific and specialized advice that we provide that arises out of sport. So those involve issues like doping issues, issues of selection. There's quite a body of case law around issues of who gets to go to games or selected to national teams or receive carding or funding, as it is in the sport world. And then what we're seeing right now, and certainly has been in the news, is issues of safe sport. So navigating the policy development, the implementation, and really addressing complaints and the complaint process under safe sport. And I think it's important to add that the sport does actually have its own specialized tribunal for dealing with sports matters. So that is a lot of my litigation or my dispute work is before this organization, which is called the SDRCC.
Now, Will, you mentioned safe sport and the policies and procedures with regards to complaints. Can you expand on that and tell us exactly or not exactly, but what is safe sport?
So there's been an evolution, I think, really in awareness over the last number of years about this topic, which, or this area, which, we now call safe sport. But it's certainly something that's been around for decades. It's gone by different names. We see it in some of the issues that have arisen in hockey over the last number of decades. We think of the James matters. We think of Theo Fleury and what he's come forward with, some of the issues that he ran into over the years. The Blackhawks, at least not to single out hockey, but being the latest in that area. But it's really now there's been a broader understanding and really scrutiny that's being applied to sport as a whole. I would say really in the last 4 or 5 years that we've seen this movement become much more kind of solidified, and really there's been a push to provide a universal or a global definition of expectation of conduct within sport.
And does this, you talk about a movement, and is this something that's been brought upon by athletes more than organizations, or has this been a movement by both organizations and athletes together? Where are they at in the spectrum of working together to come to some sort of code of conduct, as you say, to prevent their mistreatment?
I think that there's been a really there's a concerted movement. There certainly has been, seen through social media and things like that, an expansion of the athlete voice and the development of certain athlete advocacy groups, which have sort of pushed things in a certain direction. I think there's been a recognition by all parties in the sector, from the federal government to NSOs, to individuals. We all, if we think back, we all have some tie or some engagement to sport. So there really has been a concerted effort to move this ahead. And some sports have been further ahead of the curve than others, but certainly from a governance, a higher level of governance, we've seen, it's in the last 4 or 5 years that we've really seen this concerted effort to provide uniformity across the sectors and not just rely on the individual sports to develop their codes and to implement them.
Has there been anything tangible that's been uniform across all sports to address those concerns?
Yeah, and I guess there certainly has been. And this summer, in June, we saw the opening of the doors of OSIC, which is tasked. It's underneath the SDRCC. Which has been tasked with the implementation of the Universal Code of Conduct to prevent and address maltreatment in sport, which, given that's a bit of a mouthful, most people just default to the UCCMS. So we saw that open up. That was announced last year that they were going to be going with OSIC. It opens its door in June, and there has been a slow development of signatories, sports signing on to be subject to the jurisdiction of OSIC. Or abuse-free sport. The names are, have been a bit of a moving target the last few months.
And with the evolution of sport, are we talking now, like we've talked about professional sport, and you've talked a lot about, sports as an overarching, I guess, a collective, but does this code of conduct apply to organizations right from professional down to, my kid playing soccer?
Primarily would apply, and it's a bit of an outdated term, but I think what we would previously have understood as amateur sport. So much more of the Olympics outside of the professional realm. Of course, it gets quite complicated with jurisdiction when we start talking about the application of who gets to say what and what you're going to be subject to, what discipline and what code. So primarily the UCCMS, you'll see it has been integrated into a lot of national sport or NSOs policies. And there's certainly a move to have it implemented at the PTSO, the provincial, and then even the club level. But it's not there yet, and it's been a slow evolution. And I think a lot of this, and this is when I had this conversation, I would say that simply having a code of conduct, it's only going to be as good as your implementation. It's only going to be as good as what you value. So a lot of this, as I said, this is one element of your culture. That sport culture is going to be changed, and this is certainly one facet of that. But it's not the be all and end all. And I think that's what we're seeing is that if everybody thinks back to their conversations and what they had with their coaches over the years, I can distinctly being remembered playing football my last year of high school. Are you hurt or are you injured? Because I think, and that question, as well-intentioned as it was in the time, we would identify that as an inappropriate question to be asked, because that doesn't go to creating a safe culture. So, when we look at this, it's not just about providing a physical safe place. It's not just about providing an emotional safe place. It's providing both of those things, but also psychological safety, because a lot of athletes over the years have been afraid to speak up because they were concerned that there were gatekeepers that would cut them or that would affect their careers. If they did things, identify that, I have a concussion. I shouldn't be playing this. I need to sit. So, when we have this conversation about safe sport and what it is, the policy, the complaint side of it is only one aspect of it. And really, I would hope down the road is the smaller aspect of it. It's a way to identify what we want the ideal to be, but by no means is it the only element or really an endpoint.
What positive steps have you seen, Will, some organizations take to implement safe sport in their specific sport?
I think a lot of organizations, NSOs have been required since 2018 to look to move to provide an independent third party to provide for complaints, because that's really the important step, is that when individuals are faced with complaints or allegations, or they've been maltreated or they've been abused, it's who do they come forward to? Who do they look to address those concerns in a way that they know that they're not going to be swept under the rug? And I think that was one of the challenges, I shouldn't say challenge, one of the clear failings of the Blackhawks organization during their process, is that there was evaluation and a decision made that in those circumstances they would address the concerns afterwards, if at all, because they were in the middle of a cup run. So one of the key challenges, and I think one of the important part of this that sports have looked to do, is provide a safe reporting mechanism so that people can come forward and make sure that their voice is heard and that their complaints are dealt with independently and are dealt with seriously, rather than provide for the occasion for them to be swept under the rug because it's an inopportune time to be dealing with an investigation or allegations.
We'd like to thank Will Russell for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, we have to cut this short because it's the YouTube show. Fortunately, we will have Will on Off the Cuff PostScript next week, where we can talk about these topics and go in more in depth, and hopefully get a couple of war stories of Dhiren in his heyday.
I don't look forward to that, but I do look forward to talking to you again, Will. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure. It's nice to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while, so it's good.
Yeah, looking forward to our conversation next week. Thanks so much, guys.
Up next, Dhiren Soapbox.
This episode is brought to you by Weaver Simmons, Northern Ontario's largest law firm.
Welcome to my soapbox. And it dawned on me last episode that probably don't even know what a soapbox is, most of you that are listening and watching. So really, I wanted an opportunity to rant about something Matt said without Matt here. And this was what we decided on. It's my ability to fix the problem that I see as a result of whatever we've discussed on the episode, and give some insight as in, what can we do? How to improve, how to change, how to affect change, all those things that we talk about and never act on. I wanted the opportunity to be able to express my views and opinions to you guys, the viewers and listeners. So here you are, you get me for probably about 90 seconds. And today you heard from Will Russell, who is a lawyer at Sport Law, probably one of the coolest jobs to date that I've seen in the law field. He works, closely with sport organizations. He works closely with regulators, and he does a lot of really interesting things in his line of work, as you heard in his interview. Next week, when you hear his sit down on our deep dive, Will's going to talk a lot about culture, and we heard in his interview that the biggest thing plaguing sports organizations and athletes today is this culture, this culture of not being able to report anything that's going wrong. And so the UCCMS, which was what we explored with Will, is the Universal Code of Conduct for the maltreatment of athletes. And my take on this is that as a society and as a dad and as somebody who's going to have children involved in sports, and this goes right up until the professional level, where you have Olympic athletes and professional, semi-professional athletes. Everyone has a voice. And all of these issues have recently come to light. You see all the problems. We spent a little bit of time talking about the Chicago Blackhawks. We spent a little bit of time talking about Hockey Canada. And all of these athletes who have been mistreated historically have been told to sweep it under the rug. And whether it's because that team is in the midst of a playoff run or there's a big competition coming up, athletes have been historically encouraged to not express what's happened to them. And we're finding out more and more nowadays that this is becoming a problem. And so if we don't shift as a society, our culture and our views on the treatment of athletes, it's going to be very detrimental to the athletes going forward and society as a whole. And I think today we need to make a stand. We need to encourage the national sports organizations. We need to encourage our local sports organizations and everybody involved in sports, right from the professional level down to your children playing soccer, to review their policies and procedures. And it's more than one thing to just have a law or policies, because we know laws are broken and policies get broken. What we need to change is the attitude and culture in these organizations.
Sorry, I was watching the Jays game. Sports. Good soapbox. I spoke about culture. Will spoke about culture, and then you sort of tied it in perfectly together, I thought. Policies and procedures, whether it be in the workplace, even just legislation, statutes, regulations, it's one thing to have the ink on the paper, but it's the implementation of that. And in sports, we've seen it throughout history. There's been issues with the culture of sports, whether it be injuries, whether it be reporting malpractice or maltreatments, and even, these major scandals of assault, whether it be sexual or physical or otherwise. It's how those policies and procedures get implemented. And Will said it well, where, just because you say I'm not going to commit crime doesn't mean you won't commit crime. It's how do we take those steps to really address those issues? And I think those were great points in your soapbox. Very well done.
When I think Will hit the nail on the head when he said that it's a movement. Yeah. And, what has really helped with this movement is the advent of the internet and social media, and has really helped sport law evolve from what historically we've seen it, just like you described. All those things have been always going on. Yeah. But they've never been at the forefront of anybody's attention outside of the organizations. Now we're living in a world where we can see the impact this has on athletes and organizations, and both parties are able to share the experiences in a broader community, and social media has helped, and the internet as a whole has helped highlight these issues, right? And I think that, now Will had talked a little bit about the Office of the Integrity Commissioner that was just launched in June this year, and the acronym for that is OSIC. And so now what they're trying to do is encourage organizations from the top down, and by that I mean federal level, the provincial level, national organizations, provincial organizations, municipal organizations, to encourage people to sign on to this UCCMS, that code of conduct, and implement that in some capacity in their organizations, so that athletes have a place to go report and feel safe reporting. Because I think when we're talking about the culture, the biggest issue in sport has been that stigma that an athlete faces when they're hurt or injured, as Will described. And what kind of a question is that? Are you afraid to report that? Are you afraid to be cut from the team? And with these policies and procedures in place, that's one step to helping shift that culture. And I think that we have done, taken steps and done a good job in getting to where we're at today. But even just listening to Will, and you guys will see it next week on the deep dive on PostScript, where Will is going to give us that really introspective look at what safe sport is.
Yeah, it's great. And you said it well about the athletes themselves. And it's not only just about injury, being hurt, but it's also about maltreatment. Because in the UCCMS, it's to address and prevent maltreatment. So I think
proactive rather than reactive, right? And that's
that is not the tag for this episode.
I think so,
and reactive. And that was great.
I think that's where we're at. So that takes us to the end of today.
Yep.
We had a blast. It was so enjoyable catching up with Will, and now we know he's a longtime friend of mine, and a really qualified lawyer, and I respect him a lot for the work that he does.
Can't wait for next week.
Next week, you guys, you got to tune in. It's that it's just so eye opening, and the reason we do this show is to share these experiences, and we're expanding our horizons now and going outside the firm to people who are changing the world and making the world a better place to live. And that's been always the goal of this show, and that's what we want to take you. So thank you for listening today. I'm Dhiren Chauhan.
I'm Matt Butler. Go Jays.